Alright, so let's go ahead and take a look at the back page then. So we look at finding slope from a graph. So we talked about using rise over run, and now we're going to do probably the more common one for us, especially when it comes to writing equations of the lines. We're going to talk about finding slope from 2 points. So this is where I'm going to give you the option, and ideally I'm going to tell you this. I'd like you to be able to do it both ways. If you only learn to do it one way and one way only, that's fine. But I think for you moving forward, the more ways that you can do these, the better off you're going to be. Okay? So, find the slope of the line through -2 comma -1 and 4 comma -1. So as we alluded to earlier, we've got one way to talk about slope from a graph, one way to talk about slope from a table, and one way that we talk about slope if we're given 2 points. So we're going to jump to this one right here. Okay? Now you're going to bear with me here for a minute because I'm going to do this first example 4a 3 times. And I'm going to show you that doing it 3 times, we get the same answer all 3 times. I just want to show you that it doesn't matter which method you choose. Okay? So, let's say that I want to begin with this. We're going to just go ahead and use our slope formula, which says that we're taking y sub 2 subtracting y sub 1, and then we're taking x sub 2 and subtracting x sub 1. So, here's the first thing that I want to, the first way we're going to do this. For some students, they are going to look at the first ordered pair, and they're always going to call that the x sub 1, y sub 1. And they're always going to call the second ordered pair x sub 2, y sub 2. Okay, that's completely fine. Now, if we do that, let's take our y sub 2, y sub 1, x sub 2, x sub 1, and plug them in. So according to our formula, we're going to begin by taking y sub 2, which is -1 here. Okay? From this, we're going to subtract. It's always subtraction. We're going to subtract y sub 1, which is also a -1. Now, you can't go, well, there's a subtraction there, so I just put 1. No. If it's -1, you've got to subtract a -1. Okay? Now, we need to grab on the bottom x sub 2, which in this case is a positive 4. And from this, we're going to subtract x sub 1, which is a -2. Now, we've got a lot of negatives in this problem. What do we know is going to happen when we subtract a negative? We're actually adding to positive. So let's go ahead and do that here. Let's change that top, subtracting a negative, and adding a positive. Let's do the same thing on the bottom. Subtracting a negative is the same as adding a positive. So now on the top, what is -1 plus 1? 0. Okay, and if we take 4 and we add 2, that's going to give us 6. Now, as we alluded to earlier, you're never going to be allowed to have 0 in a fraction and leave it. So in example number 1, part C, 0 was on the bottom, and we said that that made our slope undefined. In this problem, when 0 is on the top, it's going to make our slope 0. That should be the slope of our line. If you were to graph it, which I'm not going to do because if we're going to graph it, we just use rise over run. But if I were to graph it, I would get a line that would be horizontal. Okay, they each have the same y value. It means that there's not going to be any rise between the two of them. Now, the second time I'm going to do this is I'm just going to do this. I'm going to flip around my x and my y's. So now I'm going to let my first ordered pair be x sub 2 and my y sub 2. And I'm going to let this one be x sub 1 and y sub 1. And I'm going to show you that it does not matter, okay, which one is which. So, if I were to use the slope formula this way, and I started by taking y sub 2, that's going to be -1. And from this, we're going to subtract y sub 1, which is also -1. Okay? Then we're going to take x sub 2, which is -2, and we're going to subtract x sub 1, which is 4. Again, what's going to happen here? Well, I have a minus a negative, which becomes a what? Plus a positive. What's -1 plus 1? 0. Okay, on the bottom. What is -2 minus 4? -6. Well, what's 0 over -6? It's still equal to 0. So our work looks different, and one of our numbers in this problem is different. We went from a 6 to a negative 6, but our slope when we reduce it should not change. The slope of a line is the slope of the line. It doesn't change if I look at it in one direction as opposed to looking at it the other direction. Just like on the first page, we drew two triangles, right? Yes? And we found the same slope each time. This is this idea. Here's one triangle. Here's another triangle. Two different triangles that we've drawn, or two different triangles that we've done, and we both end up with the same answer as a result. Now, I'm going to do a third method, and this third method is actually the only method that I showed you last year. We didn't waste any time using our slope formula. Okay? Our third method is finding slope from a table. You might say, well, Mr. Tompkins, they didn't give you a table. Nope, you're going to make one. Okay? And it's not very hard. When you go to make your table, we have our X column and our Y column. You're going to take your two ordered pairs and you're going to plug them into your table. Does it matter which order you plug them into your table? No. As long as the X column has your X coordinates and the Y column has the Y coordinates. So let's take our first ordered pair here, -2, -1, and plug that into the table. Okay, and then we're going to take our next ordered pair, which is 4, -1, and we're going to plug that into our table. Do you guys remember doing this at all last year? Yes, that would be great. Liars. Alright, so let's talk about what you add or subtract to go from one number to the other. So, from -2 to 4, it's obviously an addition problem. What do you need to add? Well, but if I take -2 and add 2, I'm only going to get to 0. To go from -2 to 4, what do I need to add? I need to add 6. We're going to put a +6 over here. Okay? To go from -1 to -1, what do you add or subtract? 0. Let's put a +0 here. Now, our slope, which again is still m, let's now think of it this way. I told you the third method, we've done rise over run from a graph. Y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1, we did that for our points. But when it comes to a table, we're going to think of this as change in y over change in x. You found both of those already. What's your change in y in this problem? 0. What was your change in x in this problem? 6. And what is 0 divided by 6? It's still 0. If you were to take these ordered pairs and you flipped the order that you put them in, you would get 0 over here and you'd get -6 over here, because to go from 4 to -2, you would subtract 6. That's still going to get you an answer of 0 when you're done. And that's the beauty of it. Like, slope can be done in so many different ways, and our answers shouldn't change. Some people will be like, well, but Mr. Tompkins, I got a negative because I did it this way. No! You got a negative because you did it wrong, not because you did it a different way. The way you do slope shouldn't change the answers you get as a result. So here's what I want you to do. Table and graph for 4B. You don't need to do not graph. Table and slope formula. You don't need to do the slope formula twice, but I want you to do the slope formula once, and I want you to confirm it with your table second. Go. Remember, answers should be reduced. Okay, again, doing one way, doing other way, confirm that you're getting the same answer. I'm not gonna require that you do this all the time on your homework, okay? But I do think it's got its values that you can do either one of these in either direction. Let's begin by using our formula first. So, we're only going to do this in one way, we're not going to flip them around and do everything else. So Caleb, give me the y value you started with.
I started with 2.
Alright, so if we start with 2, that is this y value here. From that, we need to subtract my next y value, which is 6. Now, we talked at great length about this last year, but again, we need to re-emphasize it now. You don't have a choice the order for your x's. As soon as Caleb begins by choosing his first y value is 2, what must be the first x value? It's got to be -4. And from this, we're going to subtract 2. Okay, remember, and maybe you don't, your ordered pairs have to be stacked on top of one another in your slope formula. Okay? If we take 2 minus 6, what is 2 minus 6? -4. And on the bottom we'd have -4 minus 2, which is -6. Now first of all, a negative divided by negative should be a positive. So this should be positive, but also we're going to reduce this by dividing top and the bottom each by 2. So this is just going to become a positive 2/3. And no, I don't need to see your work reducing. Like, that was your pre-algebra skill. If you want to show it, show it. But our positives, or our slopes should end up being 2/3. Now, again, I'm not going to do it again, because I'm not going to do every one of these twice. But if Caleb would have said 6 first, we would have taken 6 minus 2 and gotten positive 4 on the top. We would have done 2 minus -4, which would have given you a positive 6 on the bottom. And 4 over 6 would still reduce to give you 2/3. Okay, that would still work if we did it that way. Now, checking it the other way, let's make our table. Let's go with -4 and 2 as my first one, and 2 is 6 as my second one. So, what do we do to go from -4 to a positive 2?
Add 6.
We need to add 6. And how do we go from a positive 2 to a positive 6?
Add 4.
We need to add 4. So our slope should be change in y over change in x, which is 4 over 6. And if you divide the top and the bottom here each by 2, again, you're going to get an answer of 2/3. Again, I'm okay if we start with the table, but at some point, I would like us to get working with our formula because there'll be some applications where we'll use that later on, okay? But a table is also a great way for us to be able to do it. Alright, questions on this? Alright, then your homework for the weekend, hopefully you'll be able to get it done here even before you leave. Page 177, numbers 1 and 3 through 16. Alright, and then we'll continue this lesson on Monday, and then be ready to move on after that.